Welcome, seekers of forgotten horrors. Tonight, we plunge into a chapter of history stained with blood, burned flesh, and the stifled cries of those deemed less than human. This is not the romanticized Japan of cherry blossoms and noble samurai. This is the Japan where punishment was performance cruelty was codified, and skin was just the first layer to be peeled away in the name of order. You stand in a village in the early Edo period, somewhere deep within the Tokugawa shogunate's grip. The rice fields tremble with wind and fear. A peasant has spoken against a tax hike. He didn't shout. He didn't riot. He simply muttered under his breath, barely audible, about the weight of the grain he's forced to surrender. That whisper cost him his back. You're summoned to the center of town. No one dares to protest. Bound to a wooden post, the man's kimono is cut from shoulder to waist. The first lash lands with a wet sound skin splitting before sound even catches up. The whip, made of woven bamboo and sinew, is lined with fishbone barbs designed to snag flesh with every pull. Each strike doesn't just tear it, lifts, rips, and exposes. Blood runs down in rhythmic streams, soaking the soil. This isn't punishment. It's messaging. His body becomes a scroll, a warning carved in meat. Grim truth won. These floggings weren't meant to kill. They were precise. A set number of lashes for each offense. 15 for tax complaints. 20 for failing to bow properly. 40 for stealing food. But always just short of death, so the body could limp away and decay where others could see. After the flogging, if you survive, you are not bandaged. You are left raw, exposed to flies and infection. Pain is a sentence that continues for weeks, each breath a reminder. Your neighbors watch in silence. If they avert their eyes, they may be next. Obscure truth. Some village magistrates appointed not for justice, but efficiency, kept records of how loud the screams were. Louder meant better deterrent. They were promoted accordingly. You watch as the man collapses, blood-muddied flesh fluttering like wind-warm cloth. His punishment complete, he is dragged, not carried back to his home, where he'll be expected to resume labor once he can stand, if he can. Historians still fiercely debate whether these punishments were more psychological than physical. The brutality alone could have subdued a village, yet shogunate. Officials insisted that only when blood was visible would obedience be genuine. Sometimes the floggings weren't even legal. A particularly cruel village headman or low-ranking samurai might bypass formal process altogether. As long as no one complained upwards, and no one ever did, the scream stayed local. And you keep your head bowed, your mouth shut. You do not weep. Tears draw attention. The law does not differentiate between rebellious and weak. You hear someone whisper behind you. He should have known better. You don't know who said it. Maybe you said it yourself quietly, like a prayer to survive. That night, as cicadas drone and torchlight fades, the air smells of iron and dirt and meat. You try to sleep, but the sound of skin tearing won't leave you. You wake the next morning with the taste of fear in your throat. The man, he's still alive. Barely. His children avoid him. The village has already moved on. Only the post remains stained dark and drying under the sun. Another name will soon take his place, and you will watch again. The stench hits before the sight. You know the smell, fetid meat and rotting cloth, but here it's fused with something colder, hopelessness. You walk past the rice granaries to the execution platform raised crude, unmistakable. A body hangs, or what's left of it. He was nailed there 4 days ago. Crucifixion in Japan is not the Roman cross. It's 2 planks lashed into a T shape, just high enough for villagers to see the suffering without craning their necks. The condemned is bound and then nailed, iron spikes driven through wrists and ankles. if the bones break good. It means he won't kick, but often the goal is slow rot, not quick collapse. You were told he harbored a Christian, or spoke to one. Maybe he let a foreign priest into his barn, maybe not. The official charge doesn't matter. What matters is the punishment: 4 days nailed to wood. Left to rot, piss himself, scream, and pray loudly for forgiveness he'll never receive. Grim truth. One crucifixion under the Tokugawa shogunate was often delayed until crowds formed. Sometimes victims were hoisted in the early morning, left under the scorching sun, while school children passed on their way to temple lessons. By noon, crows had already started. By nightfall, the man begged to be finished, but they rarely finished it early. Obscure detail iron nails were often reused. They carried rust disease and the dried blood of the last man. Officials considered it poetic justice. Let the sins of the old consume the flesh of the new. You stand among others watching the flies cluster at his mouth. His tongue has swollen. His eyes already crusted over follow movement, but can't focus. Every breath is a gasp, every twitch a sign of life barely. You're told to observe, to understand what happens to those who defy order. A samurai passes behind you muttering seibatsu, corrective force. It isn't personal. It's structure. It's control. Historians still fiercely debate whether these crucifixions were meant more as political theatre than law enforcement. The victims were often peasants, rarely samurai, never nobles. The higher the class, the more discreet the punishment. But for villagers, execution was performance. And what a performance it is. By the third day, the man tries to sing. His voice is shredded raw, a gurgle through dried blood. Some say he chants a Christian hymn. Others claim it's just meaningless noise. Either way, it draws laughter from some children. The adults remain silent. On the fourth night, a storm comes. Rain lashes the corpse. The body jerks, lightning hits somewhere nearby, and the smell changes. More foul. Final. By dawn, he's dead. His legs torn at the ankles, the bones exposed. The nails hold empty flesh. His jaw is open, screaming forever. They leave him there another 2 days. You walk by it each morning. You no longer gag. You don't avert your eyes. Eventually, the platform is cleared, washed with sake, then reused. You hear another name whispered by the magistrate scribe. Another crime. Someone refused labor. Someone hoarded grain. You know how this ends. The post creaks in the wind, even when empty. A haunting noise. You start hearing it in your dreams, but you never tell anyone that. The heat is unbearable, but the fire must not go out. You stand outside the iron cauldron, 5 feet wide, blackened by years of death, and filled halfway with water that boils without pause. A samurai oversees the flames, tossing in split logs with ritual precision. 2 guards flank the accused. His hands are bound, his mouth is gagged, his crime harboring foreign ideas. Christianity again. Or perhaps just speaking in Latin. The charges are often blurred by fear and accusation. Boiling alive is reserved for those who contaminate the soul of Japan. This isn't punishment, it's purification by agony. The man's clothes are cut from him. He stands naked in the smoke, his skin already flushed from the heat. He trembles not from shame, but from the realization that death will not be quick. You want to look away, you don't. Grim truth, one boiling executions were not instant immersion. The condemned was slowly lowered by rope and pulley, inch by inch. Pain was drawn out, methodical, deliberate. Death might take 20 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. Longer if the water was kept just below boiling. The crowd is large today. Entire families have come. Children eat rice balls as a priest recites a purification chant, his voice lost in the crackle of flame and the rising scream that erupts as the man's feet touch the water. His legs thrash instinctively. Steam rises, skin sloughs off in long pink ribbons. The rope halts. Just his calves are submerged. He is pulled up. The skin bubbles. He howls a sound that splits the crowd in two, those who look away and those who lean closer. Obscure truth, certain provinces added salt to the water to increase the sting and prolong the peeling. In one record, citrus peels were added not for pain, but to cleanse the scent of sin. He's dipped again, now to the waist. You hear the sizzle. You hear the wet popping of blistered flesh bursting. His eyes roll. He convulses, still alive. A samurai records the time. This is not madness. It is protocol. And you begin to understand this is how peace is kept. Not by diplomacy, but by fire. Pain teaches faster than law. Historians still fiercely debate whether these executions were primarily anti-Christian or simply political. Many victims were peasants who never saw a foreigner in their lives. But once accused of dangerous belief, their fate was sealed. Confession didn't absolve. It confirmed. By now the man is half dead. He doesn't scream anymore, just breathes in short, sharp spasms. His skin is more red than human. He's lowered a final time, shoulders hissing beneath the surface. A final shudder. Then nothing. The rope is slackened. The corpse is hoisted and laid on straw mats beside the cauldron. The steam smells like meat and oil. The fire is not extinguished. Another name is already being prepared. The crowd disperses quietly. No one speaks of what they saw. You walk home, skin still prickling from imagined heat, the phantom scent clinging to your clothes. That night your dreams are filled with boiling sounds, water rising, ropes tightening. You wake with sweat pooling at your feet like a puddle under a hanging corpse. There is no forgetting this. And yet tomorrow they'll boil another. You've learned to keep your head low, not just out of fear, but out of survival. Because in this place, one wrong look, one hesitant word, one delayed bow can cost you your life. It's called Kirisuta Gomen, permission to cut and leave. A samurai's sacred right to kill any commoner who offends his honor. No trial, no witness needed, just the swift arc of a blade and a corpse on the ground. Today you witness it firsthand. A boy, maybe 12, crosses the dirt road too slowly. A young samurai on horseback halts. The boy doesn't bow deep enough. It happens so fast you almost miss it. Steel flashes. The boy's shoulder opens like fruit. Blood sprays the road. He drops without a sound. The samurai doesn't even dismount. He flicks his blade, turns his horse and rides on. No one moves. Grim truth, one Kirisuta Gomen was not rare. It was enshrined in law, a deadly prerogative granted to uphold samurai dignity. A misplaced glance or tardy greeting could justify death. The only rule, the samurai had to report it afterward. And even that was optional. You don't dare approach the body. It lies in the sun, eyes open, mouth slack. His mother arrives moments later, a silent scream caught in her throat. She knows better than to cry out. She simply kneels and gathers the boy's limbs into her arms. Obscure horror in some provinces, the family of the slain was required to thank the killer for the lesson. Bowing before the samurai's residence. If they failed, more executions followed. It was not justice, it was obedience through blood. Historians still fiercely debate whether Kirisuta Gomen was truly widespread or selectively enforced. Some accounts claim it was ceremonial, rarely used. But temple records and village death rolls suggest otherwise. Entire communities lived under the edge of unchecked authority. You recall another tale whispered at the market, a merchant who spoke too loudly near a samurai's home. His throat was slit where he stood. No one moved his body for hours, and sometimes it was slower. You hear of samurai who used dull blades, intentional brutal, a death by hacking rather than slicing, a lesson not just for the victim, but for the spectators. Pain became policy. One afternoon, you see a child practicing bows, dozens in a row. His father corrects him again and again, forcing him to the ground, pressing his spine until it cracks. Because one slip is all it takes. There are no monuments to the fallen, no graves, no names remembered, just roads stained with forgotten blood. You walk them every day. A cough behind you startles your bones. A samurai passes. You freeze, bow deeper. Still, he walks on. You're safe for now, but you will never feel safe again. You hear the baby cry before you see her. It's a thin sound, frail and hoarse. She's been crying for hours. No one dares to lift her, no one dares to look, because her father spoke out of turn. And under Oyako Zetsubo, the law of hereditary punishment, his shame is hers now. The entire family will bear it, branding mutilation or worse. One man's defiance becomes a curse on blood itself. They're paraded through the village, the man bound in chains, the mother barefooted, face bloodied, and behind them 3 children, all under 10. The baby is last carried by an elderly neighbor, too frightened to disobey the magistrate's orders. You know what's coming. Grim truth: one entire peasant families could be marked as traitors, not by action, but by association. Fathers executed, sons branded on the forehead with hot irons, daughters disfigured to ruin any prospect of marriage. It was called Kibatsu no Keisho punishment, that carries down. Today the man will be beheaded, his wife forced to watch. His eldest son, age 9, will have his left ear cut off. The younger daughter will have the character for thief carved into her shoulder. The baby spared the blade but not the branding iron. Obscure horror: the branding of infants was seen as preventive deterrence. If she lived, the scar would warn any future husband or neighbor she was born of sin. Some never lived long enough to carry the mark. You stand in the square as the sentence is read. The executioner, a man who no longer looks human, sharpens the blade on a river stone. The baby cries again. This time it's a scream. The beheading is fast, efficient. The father's head lands in a woven basket lined with straw. The mother collapses but is whipped back to her knees. She must watch the rest. The boy doesn't cry when they slice his ear. He just stares, hollow, older than he was a moment ago. The girl trembles as the branding iron hisses against her flesh. The smell curls into your nostrils, burning skin, urine, fear. Then comes the baby. The iron is smaller, custom made for infants. They press it to her thigh. She howls. The scar will warp as she grows, a lifetime reminder of a father's words. Historians still fiercely debate whether hereditary punishment was codified law or a cultural extension of collective shame. Some argue it was rare, but temple death registers and shrine archives tell a bloodier story. You see the family afterward lying together on the cold earth, the dead and the half destroyed. Their home will be burned, their name will be stricken from records, and the rest of the village. You work harder that week, speak less, smile more, because you now understand your blood is not your own. It can be taken, burned, passed down as a warning. You still hear that baby scream at night, and you will, always. The pit is already dug. You don't remember who dug it. Maybe it was the villagers. Maybe it was someone like you. But now, a man kneels at its edge, his body already battered, nose broken ribs, cracked lips swollen with dried blood. His hands are tied behind him. His face is barely recognizable, but you know his name. Everyone does. He stole from the storehouse. Rice. Just enough to keep his sick wife breathing. It doesn't matter now. This is Ishiuchi death by stoning. But this is no execution carried out by guards or magistrates. This is a communal act, a purge. Every villager must throw a stone. Even you. Grim truth, one being buried to the neck and stoned, was used for crimes deemed unclean, especially theft, blasphemy, or betrayal of one's caste. The body was concealed. Only the face remained exposed, pleading, waiting. They force him into the pit. He doesn't scream. That part's done. Dirt is shoveled back in around him. Tight, controlled. Only his head protrudes just above the surface like a forgotten root. The magistrate gives the signal. A stone lands with a dull thunk against the man's forehead. Blood blooms. The crowd shifts, hesitates, then moves. Obscure truth, those who refused to throw a stone were sometimes marked as sympathizers. The next day, they would disappear, or be fined beyond what they could pay. Compliance wasn't enough. Participation was mandatory. You pick up your stone. It's smaller than the others. Your hand trembles. You tell yourself it's not you who's killing him. It's the law, the system, the village. But the sound it makes when it hits his jaw is very much yours. A child throws next, then his neighbor, then his cousin. The man gurgles something, maybe a prayer, maybe his wife's name. No one listens. The pile of stones grows. Blood flows between them like rain down a cracked roof. His teeth scatter in the dirt. His left eye swells shut, then bursts. The right one stares unblinking. Historians still fiercely debate whether these punishments were rare or intentionally undocumented. Few records remain, only rumors, oral accounts, and hidden shrine scrolls. But the fear lingers past from grandparent to grandchild, like a curse never spoken aloud. After the man dies, slumped, jawless face sunken, there is silence. No announcement, no cheers. Just the wind whistling across the stones, now sticky with blood and guilt. You walk home. No one speaks that night. Meals are quiet. Doors stay shut. The pit is filled in before dawn. You never say his name again. None of you do. But every time someone walks past that patch of earth, their steps falter. Their eyes shift. You remember. You all do. It's quiet now. But the silence isn't peace, it's residue. What you've seen is not the fringe of Japanese history. These were sanctioned acts. Cold. Documented. Administered in public squares beneath the same sky you live under now. Every wound inflicted by flame, by blade, by stone wasn't a lapse in civilization. It was civilization. The people didn't rise. They bowed deeper. They didn't scream. They whispered. And those whispers died beneath dirt floors and rotted rafters, while the systems that fed on pain endured for centuries. Some of these rituals, these laws of inherited punishment and honorable executions, have no modern equivalents, but their echoes live on in the way obedience is demanded, in the way silence is rewarded, in the way terror is folded into law and called order. Look at the scars of history and then ask yourself if you had been there, if you were born on that road in that village under that rule. Would you have stood up, or would you have thrown the stone? The pit is still there. You just can't see it. Welcome, seekers of forgotten horrors. Tonight, we plunge into a chapter of history stained with intellect, turned to ash, reason punished by death, and brilliance decapitated to decorate a tyrant's garden. You stand now in the courtyard of madness, once green, once vibrant, now an oshery under the Cairo sun. Here in the palace of Caliph al-Hakim bi-Amr, Allah, the severed skulls of scholars do not rot in secret graves. They are arranged with care, polished and numbered, staring blankly from beneath cypress trees. The fragrance of orange blossoms mixes with the stink of desiccated brain matter. You walk among ghosts. Before we descend further, consider marking this video for those who dare to witness history's true brutality. Subscribe if you crave these forgotten truths. Post your location and local time in the comments, a chilling reminder that you still breathe freely. Now steel your nerves, prepare for discomfort, and let the grim echoes of the past consume us. You hear the crunch of gravel beneath your feet, but it is not gravel. They are teeth. The caliph's garden paths were paved with fragments, molars, canines, tiny flakes of jawbone, all from men who once questioned the heavens or calculated the stars. Under al-Hakim's reign, the pursuit of knowledge was not a path to enlightenment, it was a direct road to the scaffold. Historians still fiercely debate whether al-Hakim's obsession with executing scholars stemmed from genuine theological fervor, paranoid delusions, or a calculated strategy to silence dissent. But the result remains indisputable. More than 400 public intellectuals vanished, or were found mutilated during his reign from 996 to 1021, and not quietly. You are there on a windless morning when the palace guards drag 3 men into the courtyard. They are not rebels, they are not thieves. They are astronomers from the House of Wisdom arrested for suggesting that the moon's phases might be predictable. One begs, one recites verses from the Quran. The last simply smiles defiant. Al-Hakim watches from a balcony above. He raises one finger. Heads are removed with expert precision. Within an hour, their skulls are placed on stone pedestals and labeled in ink heretic, seducer of minds, agent of Iblis. The Caliph is known to walk this garden of silence each night, speaking to the skulls as if they're debating him still. Witnesses say he sometimes argues back. His attendants pretend not to notice. There's a rumor among the terrified elite, if you anger him with logic, your jaw is broken first. That way your skull stays whole for the display. In time, the executions become more theatrical. One surgeon is slowly flayed in front of the court for suggesting that diseases are caused by contaminated water, not divine will. His skin is peeled in sheets, while the caliph eats dried figs and nods politely. The scholar's death isn't immediate. He screams for 17 minutes. His final words, "Rid the water." Al-Hakim has his tongue cut out and preserved in salt. For display. You are present when the physician Ibn Yunus, one of the greatest astronomers of the age, delivers an observation that the stars do not in fact change positions by divine decree. He is spared execution perhaps because of his prestige, but his writings burned on the steps of the mosque. His students, one by one, summoned and never seen again. The garden grows. And here's the grim truth that locks in your throat. This is not medieval rumor. The Skull Garden is documented by multiple sources, visitors who left Cairo pale and vomiting. Even those who admired the caliph's piety could not stomach the arrangement. Some say the skulls were eventually buried. Others claim they still lie beneath modern Cairo's foundations. Historians still fiercely debate whether the garden was literal or symbolic. Yet every account agrees on one point: the caliph's obsession with scholar blood was real and unrelenting. A particularly grotesque record mentions that Al-Hakim had a special slave, tasked only with oiling the skulls so they would not crack in the sun. He was blind, so he would not go mad from the stairs. And as you stand there, suffocated by the heat, surrounded by mute genius turned to bone, you realize something chilling. It wasn't about silencing ideas. It was about turning wisdom into warning. This was not the graveyard of learning, it was its execution chamber. The silence of the garden does not last. From your vantage beside the perfumed corpse trees, you hear them drag in another. Not a scholar this time, worse. A teacher. A woman. She was arrested not for spreading lies but for spreading books. Her name is lost, but she taught girls to read in the district of Fustat, to read Arabic, Coptic, Greek, the languages of the scriptures and the philosophers. For this, her punishment is specific. You watch as she's bound to a tall chair, its arms lined with bronze nails, its legs weighted so she cannot move. Her eyelids are sliced off, not to blind her, no, to force her to see. Pages from Aristotle's Metaphysics are stuffed into her mouth. When she gags, a scribe calmly lights the edge of each page with a taper. Her eyes remain wide, pinned open by the sunlight, until only smoke and spit pour from between her lips. The caliph's guards call it a book burning. They laugh, but no one else does. You certainly don't. And still more come. Al-Hakim doesn't strike all at once. His brutality escalates like a fever. At first he bans music, then chess, then the sale of raisins. He claims grapes fermented too easily and led men to vice. You hear whispers that his mother was Christian and his father a tyrant. The scribes who record these family truths are hung upside down from the library rafters until their organs slide into their skulls. You know this because one of them, a calligrapher named Bashir, lived long enough to describe the sensation before his heart ruptured. The caliph's rage widens. He declares war on dogs. Hundreds are slaughtered in Cairo's streets, poisoned, beheaded, their corpses left to rot as warnings. No reason is given. Some speculate it was due to a dream he had in which the prophet scolded him for being watched by eyes unclean. A dog's gaze. That was all it took. Among the growing wreckage, scholars try to flee. Some are caught at the border and blinded. Others escape, but their families are rounded up. A mathematician's daughter is tied inside an abacus frame and drowned. The symbolism is intentional. Remember that smell, burnt skin and dried fruit. It returns every time he burns the House of Wisdom's archives again. Yes, again, for he burns it twice during his reign. First in 1004, then again in 1010, when new scrolls were smuggled in. You watch a century's worth of thinking turn to ash, while the caliph stands barefoot in the cinders whispering prayers. Historians still fiercely debate whether Al-Hakim truly understood what he was destroying, or whether he believed he was purifying Egypt of heresy. Some argue he was a devout reformer. Others call him the mad caliph. But both sides agree his fury was surgical. One grim truth: he once funded the translation of Plato, only to order the translator's public castration months later, citing philosophical pride. You follow the blood trail left by his decrees. Synagogues are stripped. Torah scrolls smeared with pig's blood. Churches are raised, their bells melted down into shackles. Even the holy site of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is desecrated by his order. Pilgrims find only rubble where Christ's tomb once stood. That single act reverberates centuries forward. It becomes one of the inciting reasons for the First Crusade. A madman's wrath echoing into global catastrophe. But here in Cairo, the madness continues unchecked. You walk now past the courtyard again. It has expanded. New skulls gleam in the moonlight. You recognize one. It's the blind slave who oiled them. His job, it seems, was never meant to end peacefully. The caliph grows increasingly paranoid. He bans women from walking the streets during the day. If one is seen, her fingers are amputated. He claims jewelry corrupts their modesty. The city's goldsmiths are commanded to melt all female adornments into coin. Any who hesitate are boiled in their own crucibles. Yes, that happened. Boiled alive in vats meant for bracelets. And all the while he keeps talking to the skulls. One evening a servant hears him whispering to them, "You judged me, but I judged first." That same servant is later found dead with wax poured into both ears. You feel Cairo suffocate under this silence, not peace, but the kind of hush that settles on a battlefield after the last scream. By now you've stopped counting the skulls. The courtyard is full. The caliph's guards have begun stacking them in columns, arranging them into crude totems that lean and crack under the desert sun. Some say they shift positions at night. Others swear they whisper. But the palace halls are no quieter. You're summoned inside, through mosaic corridors and air that stinks of sandalwood and slaughter. You pass a fountain choked with rose petals and blood. You recognize a eunuch's foot bobbing at the surface. The caliph has decided to entertain himself tonight. You're made to stand along the perimeter of the throne room. 30 others flank you, servants, scribes, courtiers. No one speaks. No one dares look up. Al-Hakim sits alone on a slab of marble, dressed entirely in black. Around him, not cushions or ministers, but skulls, arranged like an audience. His audience. He lifts a finger. A prisoner is brought forward, a surgeon. Once respected, once decorated. Now accused of impiety for claiming that the heart, not the liver, rules the body. His punishment is anatomical. They begin by removing his tongue. Not quickly, not cleanly. They cut inch by inch, pausing to cauterize so he does not bleed out before the main event. Then the ribcage is exposed, and you are made to watch closely as his heart is removed while still fluttering. The caliph calls it corrective education. No one dares look away. This is the second grim truth of this chapter. Al-Hakim's savagery was not random. It was precise. Every punishment had symbolism. Every execution was a message. Surgeons dissected. Philosophers silenced by paradox. Poets drowned in ink. And the third, he documented all of it. You've seen the records. In the Palace of Silence, a winged few dare enter, Al-Hakim kept ledgers. Not of taxes, but of tortures. Rows upon rows of names, dates and punishments. Some are simple ate in daylight during Ramadan scalped. Others are baroque. Said the stars determined fate had his intestines arranged into constellations. It sounds impossible, until you remember the stench. Historians still fiercely debate whether these books were genuine administrative tools or something more disturbing, personal trophies. If the latter, it means he didn't just order these horrors. He relived them, page by page. The city shifts around his madness. Markets close at sunset, not by choice but fear. Glassmakers go blind, creating special panes that distort reflection. Al-Hakim fears seeing his own face. Every mirror is smashed, every fountain defiled. Women vanish from the streets. Men are taken in the night for minor infractions. Beard too long, turban too white, voice too loud. One night, he commands that every cat in Cairo be slaughtered. They say it took 3 days. You see them piled in alleys, their bodies swollen with sun and silence. No reason is ever given. Perhaps they reminded him of something, or someone. Perhaps they stared too long. And still the caliph walks the city, alone, in disguise. This is no rumor. You've seen him, his lips dyed black, his cloak ash-colored, barefoot, in the alleys, whispering into corners. He asks questions, always questions. Do you think I am mad? Does God watch me sleep? Would you die for truth or for fear? If the answer displeases him, you vanish by morning. You hear the phrase now spoken in every shop, every prayer room. God has no shadow in Cairo. A way of saying no protection, no shield, no divine mercy here. Only one man's will. You remember the astrologer, an old man, blind in one eye, summoned to read omens for the caliph's birthday. He warns of a coming eclipse, a bad sign, he says, unless the ruler atones. Al-Hakim listens calmly, then orders the man sewn into a sack with scorpions. He is hurled into the Nile. The river bubbles red for hours. That's when the disappearances accelerate. Priests, physicians, judges, anyone with a voice. They vanish into the palace of silence. You no longer ask why. You only wonder when. And then comes the most bewildering act yet. He declares himself divine. Not metaphorically, not with poetry, but in clear, blasphemous decree. I am the manifestation, he says. I am Al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah, the one who rules by God's command. And I am that command. You hear it first whispered in mosques, then carved into stone. Coins minted with his name as God's embodiment. Those who refuse to repeat it are flogged in public until their tongues hang loose. Strangely, a sect emerges, the Druze. Not just accepting his claim, but celebrating it. They vanish into the mountains, calling him the hidden one destined to return. You realize something horrible. Even madness finds worshippers. Even cruelty births cults. The palace of silence grows quieter. Not because the tortures stop, but because they become normal, routine. Like weather, like taxes, like the coughing of the guards polishing skulls at midnight. One evening, the moon turns blood red. The eclipse arrives just as the astrologer said, and the caliph is nowhere to be found. Not in his throne room, not in the streets, not in the torture wing. Some say he walked into the desert barefoot and mumbling and never returned. Others say he dissolved into smoke. The only thing found was his donkey still saddled tied to a tree near the Mokattam hills, its eyes wide with terror. You watch the court unravel in silence. The skulls remain, the ledgers remain, but the man who filled them gone. The disappearance of Al-Hakim was not the end of terror. It was its haunting echo. You live in a city built on absences now. The absence of bodies, the absence of answers, the absence of mercy. No grave was ever found, no death was confirmed. But the fear that remained, that thickened, that fermented in the blood of every citizen like a chronic sickness. They whisper now of his return. The hidden ones say the followers of the new sect. The Druze refuse to believe he died. They say he watches from beyond the veil of reality, from the 12th realm or the 7th sky, or a cave beneath Cairo's foundations, depending on which mad scroll you read. You've seen one such scroll written in crushed beetles and blood. It claims he will return with eyes of coal and a crown of bone. You almost believe it, because the silence left behind is not peace. It's waiting. In the power vacuum, ministers crawl out like insects. Some try to reverse the decrees. Others double down, afraid of being seen as heretics in case he really is divine. The laws clash. 1 week wine is legal. The next the drinkers are flayed alive. And always the skulls remain. You pass them every morning, lined along the causeway like milestones of madness. Weathered by sun, cracked by wind, their empty sockets gaze across the city like blind prophets. No one removes them. No one dares. Children are born who grow up knowing no other reality. They play beside them. learn their alphabet by counting the notches on their crania. One child tries to remove a skull for a game of toss. He disappears the next day. His mother finds only his shoes, placed neatly in the courtyard, pointing toward the hills. People say the caliph's donkey still roams there, saddled, foaming at the mouth. And then there are the deaths. Not public anymore, not theatrical, but calculated, hidden. A merchant who laughs at a joke about Al-Hakim dies vomiting blood. A librarian who moves one of the torture ledgers is found split in half, the spine of the book embedded in her throat. Each death a reminder that the caliph's absence is not the same as mercy. The Druze build shrines, quiet ones in mountains and caves unreachable by sane men. You've seen drawings, altars made of broken mirrors, walls of silence, no doors. They do not speak his name aloud. Only the title Al-Hakim, the wise, the ruler by God's command. Others call him the lunatic caliph or the god of skulls. You call him what he made you afraid. And yet, despite the horror, despite the cruelty, you remember what came before. The decay, the rot in the old Fatimid court, the arrogance of scholars who mocked belief, the corruption of judges who sold verdicts, the hollow prayers of imams who bowed only to coin. Al-Hakim smashed it all. With fire and madness, yes, but also with clarity. He exposed it. He destroyed it. And in the ashes, some say, he purified something. But at what cost? The price was not just blood. It was memory. Books gone, songs lost, languages erased. Schools burned until all that remains is a void where meaning once lived. You think of one image now more than any other. A monk, beaten, bound, begging for mercy outside the palace. He had hidden scrolls, copies of ancient texts, some say from Aristotle, others from Egyptian tombs. He thought knowledge could save him. Al-Hakim ordered his lips sewn shut, then set him on fire. But before the flames reached his eyes, the monk looked up, not in terror, but in defiance. And the caliph, for a brief moment, looked afraid. That moment stays with you, because it means one thing for all his proclamations of godhood. He knew. Somewhere deep within the madness, he knew he was just a man who could be judged, a man who could be remembered not as divine, but as damned. And now that memory is yours to hold. So you write, carefully, secretly. You bury pages in clay jars, hide them in well shafts, etch them behind tiles. You know it may be centuries before anyone finds them. But when they do, they will see not a god, not a messiah, but a butcher of wisdom, a strangler of truth, the builder of a throne made not of gold, but of skulls. And in the silence that follows, they will hear your voice. Quiet, trembling, but still alive. The death of a tyrant should have been the end of fear. But this is Cairo under Al-Hakim. Even in death, especially in death, he rules. You walk the alleyways with your eyes down, your mouth shut, your thoughts sealed. The walls still whisper. The wind still carries decrees never issued. The palace sits heavy on the horizon, silent now, but watching. Always watching. You remember when they found the robe. Months after his disappearance, a shepherd stumbled on the tattered remains. Torn silk, blood, and a dagger snapped at the hilt. But no body, no bones. Just the suggestion of violence and a void where certainty should be. The palace declared him martyred. The sect declared him immortal. And you remember the stench of burnt parchment, the crackle of flesh over slow flame, the screams echoing from copper tubes jammed into the ears of priests. That doesn't vanish with a robe. Now, in the shadow of his so-called martyrdom, anew, new cult blossoms feral, ecstatic, unshackled. You see them at night, naked or dressed in scraps of midnight blue, faces painted with ash and ink. They gather on rooftops, eyes rolled white, chanting in a language that doesn't quite match Arabic or Persian. It's older than Fatimid Cairo, maybe older than sanity. They call him the returning one. They burn candles made from human fat. They slit their tongues in homage. And when the moon is high and sickle-shaped, they whisper things no human should know. That he lives. That he will return not as flesh but as judgment. That those who denied him will vomit snakes and rot from the soul outward. You once tried to interrupt a ceremony. You still walk with a limp. What began as policy has metastasized into faith. And faith, once infected, festers beyond logic. Even the muezzins hesitate now, afraid that calling the faithful to prayer might anger the God in hiding. So silence creeps in, like rot through timber. But others resist, quietly. You hear of scholars gathering in ruined bathhouses, transcribing banned books by memory alone. You catch whispers of surgeons restoring those who survived the torture's tongueless men, who now communicate by ink and eye. You glimpse smuggled pages of the Kitab al-Zara, the lost encyclopedia al-Hakim ordered burned in a single night. You touch one once, just once. The page crackled like dry skin, but the ink held geometry, stars, a map of Saturn drawn in perfect proportion. And you wept, not because it was beautiful, but because it had nearly been lost to one man's vanity. One man's vision of perfection forged in blood and denial. Historians still fiercely debate whether al-Hakim was mad from the start or driven to madness by absolute power, whether his violent purges masked genuine reform or were simply the spasms of a collapsing psyche. But what none debate is this: he broke Cairo, not with armies, not with sieges, but with ideas. He took the spine of a civilization, its knowledge, its rituals, its moral compass, and dislocated it, shifted it sideways, left it twitching on the floor, and then he vanished. Some say his sister orchestrated the whole thing. Al-Sit al-Mulk, clever, ruthless, possibly brilliant. They say she lured him to the hills and ensured he never returned. That she cleaned the blood from the throne and restored some semblance of normalcy. But it wasn't normal. It never would be again. The people had tasted divinity wrapped in tyranny, had seen mosques become slaughterhouses and scrolls become kindling, had worshipped a man who flung his own mother from a tower, who demanded that streets be emptied when he walked not for safety, but so the very dust would not defile his gaze. You don't recover from that. You inherit it. And so it seeps forward, into children's lullabies twisted by remembered screams, into architecture buildings now constructed with no windows, no corners, always watching, into the pulse of a city that still flinches when bells toll, still halts when a donkey passes riderless. The donkey, yes, still alive, half mad. Sometimes it appears near the palace gates, snorting, stomping eyes rimmed red, and everyone backs away. Because maybe it remembers. Maybe it carries the weight of sins too heavy for beasts. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for a voice that once whispered divine commands into its ears. You think of fleeing. You've thought of it for years. But the city holds you because someone must remember. Someone must speak, even if only to the stones, of what it was like to live under a God who demanded not faith but fear. So you carve his story into a broken lintel near the river. Not his triumphs, not his decrees, but his violence. The truth he couldn't erase. You use your own blood. It dries brown, but it stays. Dawn returns to Cairo, as it always does, soft pink, indifferent. You sit in the shadow of the crumbling southern wall beside an old spice vendor who no longer speaks. His wife was taken during the night of the lamps. No one ever told him why. He still arranges jars each morning, still smiles, still forgets, or pretends to. Around you the city exhales, slowly, like lungs unused to breathing. The minarets remain, so do the scars. In the alleys behind Al-Azhar, students once again read aloud, cautiously, poetry first, then logic, then math, as if rebuilding a shattered soul from the outer edges inward, but always watching the horizon. Because memory is a double-edged relic here. Some remember to protect, others to return. The cult still exists. It moved underground, of course, like fungus or rot, no longer parading on rooftops or bleeding in public squares. Now they whisper in cellars in the cisterns beneath abandoned hammams. You see their symbols scratched into clay pots etched behind walls newly plastered, a circle pierced by a flame. They speak of the seventh returning. No one knows what that means, but they collect bones. They chant in reverse, and sometimes children vanish for nights at a time, only to return changed, quiet, smiling, blinking too slowly. And always the skulls remain. They become part of the cityscape, half buried in gardens set into fountains built into mosaics. Some were clean, decorated, even gold-leafed by later dynasties turned from warnings into curiosities. But others still scream in their silence. You've seen them. Cracked by fire, teeth shattered mid-word, the backs crushed by blows that had no mercy in them. These weren't just decorations. They were the punctuation marks of a reign that demanded worship through obliteration. A foreign diplomat once called Al-Hakim the philosopher of shadows. He was wrong. Al-Hakim wasn't a philosopher. He hated thinkers, hated questions that didn't end with obedience. He built a theology where logic was treason, and breath itself needed permission. And yet, even now, people still argue his intentions. Some paint him as a proto-reformer, abolishing tax farms, caring for the poor, restraining the aristocracy. They ignore the piles of ash, the river that once ran brown with pulp from the library of Dar al-Hikmah, the baby nailed to a scholar's door as a message. But truth is a slippery corpse when power embalms it. You've aged, knees ache, fingers stiff, but you still carry the ink and bone of memory. You've buried friends for saying less than what you now whisper to strangers in the market. And still you speak. Because if silence wins, he wins. He always wanted silence, not peace, not stillness. Silence as in no contradiction, as in no resistance, as in the grave. But here you are, old and defiant. You sit under the wall where the heads once hung. You sip tea from a cracked cup, and you remember out loud. You describe the night he banned shoes, then the next day ordered execution for barefoot disrespect. You recite the name of every philosopher thrown from the palace roof. You count them like beads. You wear their names like armor. You tell young boys about the woman who refused to praise him and how her tongue was fed to dogs. They ask you why you remember these things. You answer, so I never believe again that madness dressed in silk deserves reverence. The call to prayer rises, not silenced, now not twisted, and the city breathes again. Above you, pigeons nest in the holes once used to hang corpses. Their wings flutter softly. The sun climbs the dome of the old observatory, the one he burned because the stars would not obey his command. And the light falls on stone, on skull, on script, on a city that survived a man who believed he was God. Cairo lives, so do you. And as long as you do so, does the truth. Welcome, seekers of forgotten horrors. Tonight, we plunge into a chapter of history stained with venom betrayal and a ruler so paranoid that he tried to murder death itself. You open your eyes in a palace where loyalty is measured in doses and a cup of wine can be a death sentence. The corridors reek of lavender and fear. Tonight's descent takes you to the blood-slicked cradle of Mithridates VI of Pontus, a king who grew up in the shadows of sharpened daggers and learned far too early that trust was poison. Before we descend further, consider marking this video for those who dare to witness history's true brutality. Subscribe if you crave these forgotten truths. Comment your location and local time below just to remind yourself that for now you're safe. Now steel your nerves, prepare for discomfort, and let the grim echoes of the past consume us. You are 7 years old. You are heir to a small but powerful kingdom on the southern coast of the Black Sea. And you are alone. Not in the literal sense your palace teems with advisors, eunuchs, siblings, and servants, but in the sense that no one here wants you alive. The king, your father, is dead, possibly poisoned. Historians still fiercely debate whether it was your mother Laodice who slipped something into his food. She now acts as regent, though you know she wants her other son, your younger brother, on the throne. You begin to sleep with one eye open, watching your food tasters more closely than your tutors. And when the nightmares come, they aren't of monsters but of being held down by palace guards, forced to drink medicine with a smile. The boy who would one day try to conquer Rome does not spend his childhood training in the arts of war, but in perfecting the art of survival. By age 11, he reportedly retreats into the wilderness, hiding among shepherds and wolves, living like a phantom prince. In these 2 years of exile, you begin collecting venomous snakes, poisonous herbs, and mushrooms that blister the throat on contact. You learn which cause spasms, which kill quickly, which leave the victim writhing in agony for hours, muscles clenching until the ribs snap. And you test them on insects, birds, stray animals, maybe a servant or two. When you return to Pontus, you're taller, stronger. The boy is gone. The king in waiting has returned. You do not confront your mother with tears. You do not beg. You wait. One day, Laodice falls ill. Some say it was plague. Some say it was fate. Others say you slipped a dose of belladonna into her wine and waited for the fever to take her. You ascend the throne with a smile. At age 13, you become Mithridates VI. Eupator, soon to be called the Poison King. Your reign does not begin with a parade or a treaty. It begins with blood. Your brother dies suddenly. Natural causes, they say. Then your sister vanishes. Then your mother is found convulsing, eyes rolled back, limbs jerking like a puppet whose strings have snapped. The court whispers, but no one dares accuse. Because everyone knows this is not a boy king anymore. This is a young man who never sleeps without guards. A ruler who tests food, water, and even the ink in his scribes' pens for contamination. A mind already tuned to the frequency of death. You build a private library of toxicology, collecting scrolls on hemlock, arsenic, strychnine. You correspond with healers, apothecaries, assassins. You surround yourself with doctors not to heal you, but to teach you how to die slower. And then, at only 15, you begin a ritual. Each day you take a measured dose of poison. Minute quantities just enough to sting. First the mild ones, snake venom diluted in goat's milk. Then arsenic dissolved in wine. Then mixtures of hemlock and opium, belladonna and aconite. Each carefully recorded, each reaction studied. You vomit, you shake, you bleed from the nose, but you live. And each time the dose increases, your body adapts. You begin to feel nothing. The pain becomes routine like morning stretches or sword drills. This is not madness. This is war preparation. Because you know what waits for kings. You know what Rome does to men who dare to rule independently. You know your enemies cannot match your army, but they will find a quieter way to kill you. So you make your flesh a prison. You train your body like armor. One grim truth. You become so immune to poison that even medicine ceases to work on you. Another. Later in life, your enemies will attempt to assassinate you with wine and honey laced with opium. You'll finish the glass, smile, and walk away. But the price is steep. Your joints begin to ache. Your gums bleed. Your skin grows pale, bruises appearing without cause. You laugh more rarely. You sleep more fitfully. Some days you feel your own body fighting against its self-immune system, strangled by exposure. Still, you continue. You add new poisons to your daily diet: spider venom, crushed emeralds, powdered scorpions. You don't just ingest them. You rub them into your gums. You inject them with hollow reeds. You make your body a temple of death. There are stories, dark half-whispered, of you testing poisons on prisoners, marking their time of death with quiet fascination. One obscure detail most never hear, a fragment of an account, says you once hosted a banquet where the wine was divided, half drank freely, half began choking halfway through the second course. No one spoke. No one left. That night, 14 guests were buried in silence. And you, already building the persona of a living god, told your council the deaths were divine punishment for disloyalty. They believed you. They had no choice. You were already no longer fully human. You were something else now, a being sustained by venom and vengeance. Now you stand at the center of your court. The floors are polished marble, cool beneath your feet. Above you, golden serpents twist through the ceiling moldings, your chosen emblem. The silent, elegant killers. You are no longer a boy king, but a god king. At least that's how they whisper it in the halls. Because you still live. Because assassins vanish. Because even your enemies begin to believe the rumors that you are untouchable. That you are unkillable. And to them, it's not just your armies or cunning diplomacy that strike fear, it's your ritual. Every morning before council, you take the same silver bowl in hand. Inside a paste the color of dried blood. You stir it yourself. No one else touches it. A blend of hemlock resin, diluted opium, crushed aconite, and a dozen substances known only to you and your silent court physician, who dares not even look you in the eyes. You raise it to your lips. The room stills. You swallow. Your advisors pretend to look away, but they're all watching. If you fall, if you retch, if your eyes widen, then someone has succeeded. But you never do. You nod once coldly. And the day begins. It is here, in these daily rites of slow death, that the myth becomes real. You are not content with a mere immunity. You want understanding, mastery. So you begin testing. Prisoners arrive, condemned criminals, debtors, captured spies. Each is given a different mixture. Some drop dead in seconds, clutching their throats. Others spasm violently for minutes, limbs seizing, eyes bulging until vessels burst. One man screams for an hour, voice flaying into a hoarse gurgle as his stomach digests itself from the inside. You take notes. Your scribes handpicked and loyal record everything. Dosage, reaction time, duration of suffering. You refine your formula dose by dose. Over years you develop what you call the Mithridatium, a universal antidote to all known poisons. A concoction of more than 50 ingredients: snake venom resin of storax, myrrh, gentian root, saffron, cinnamon, and even dried viper flesh. You drink it every morning, and you force your sons to do the same. This is not love. This is protection against Rome, against betrayal against one another. One son, Machares, vomits blood and collapses during the first month of training. You do not call for help. He either adapts or dies. He adapts, but his eyes never meet yours again. A lesser-known fact, you even experiment with poisons in perfumes. One Roman ambassador once reported that your court stank of rotted flowers and vinegar. In reality, the scent masked the trace aromas of death arsenic dissolved in rosewater to be sprayed on enemy hands during diplomatic handshakes. Not all experiments succeed. One concubine dies foaming at the mouth after sleeping in a bed scented with your new sleep balm. Her lungs blacken from inside. You order silence. Her body is burned. The ashes are dumped into the sea. Her name is never spoken again. This is the cost of your pursuit. But still you continue. You build chambers beneath the palace, dark windowless, lined in stone. In these, you test gas vapors, combinations of incense and powdered minerals. Slaves are brought in and bound to chairs, the doors sealed. Moments later, they begin coughing, then choking, then silence. You study the effects, record the timing, refine your doses. This is no longer just about survival. This is control. You begin to plan if poison can defend, it can also conquer. It can be sent in sealed letters, hidden in amphorae of wine, dusted on scrolls, introduced into aqueducts. You begin developing a plan to introduce toxins into Roman supply lines, into diplomatic banquets, into the very breath of your enemies. Historians still fiercely debate whether you ever succeeded at this scale. Some claim Roman generals suffered mysterious fevers before key battles. Others say entire garrisons were found dead without visible wounds. There is no definitive proof, but one Roman report does survive. A surviving legionnaire writes of a banquet hosted by Mithridates where the wine was thick and sweet, and the next morning 12 men never woke. They did not bleed. They did not foam. They simply ceased. Your legend spreads. Merchants speak of a king who drinks poison as you might drink milk. Ambassadors whisper of a monarch who cannot be killed not by dagger, not by goblet, not even by Rome itself. And all the while you continue. One obscure tidbit, you commission a necklace carved from the vertebrae of a man who tried to poison you. His ribs had punctured his lungs as he seized. You kept the bones, not out of cruelty, but as data. Still, you are not reckless. You build layers of trust, placing food tasters at every meal, often slaves, eunuchs, or condemned men. They eat, they wait. Only then do you eat. But sometimes you skip the wait. Sometimes in moments of absolute power you take the first bite deliberately, visibly. You stare down your court as you chew, swallow, and smirk. No one breathes, because if you survive, you've proven it again. You are untouchable. But if you don't, no, you always survive. Your daily poison ritual becomes something more. It is religion. It is identity. It is fear weaponized. You no longer trust food, or wine, or the air, but you trust the ritual, and it works. You do not fall. You cannot fall. Not yet. The palace stinks of iron and myrrh. The scent clings to your skin, to your breath, to your thoughts. Somewhere nearby, a man screams his last. You don't flinch, because you ordered it. You are Mithridates Set, sixth King of Kings, and your rule now stretches beyond Pontus. You have absorbed Cappadocia, Armenia, minor parts of Galatia, and are eyeing Bithynia next. But territory is never enough. You want memory, fear. You want the Romans to whisper your name in their prayers and in their nightmares. And so you show them who you are. Let the Romans build roads. You build pits. Outside Sinope, you construct execution arenas, open spaces where your enemies, and often your own citizens, are led to die in inventive, deliberate fashion. Thieves are flayed alive. Spies have molten lead poured into their ears. And those who betray your court, they are given a different fate. You call it the suffocation rite. They are led into a sealed room. The floor is covered in burning coals. Onto this you throw toxic herbs, henbane, juniper resin, and black hellebore. The smoke rises, thick, acrid. It fills their lungs. Their screams twist into gurgles. Some claw at the walls trying to chew through stone. Others convulse and soil themselves before collapsing in twitching heaps. You watch through a slit in the wall, not with glee, not even with malice, with calculation. This too is data. You are perfecting a method of mass execution that leaves no blood, no trace, only silence and ash. One grim truth. These poison chambers are tested not only on traitors, but on Roman prisoners of war, senators, scribes, even merchants caught in the wrong city at the wrong time. You call it research. Your court calls it cleansing. You call it justice. And yet the most chilling moment comes not in war, but in punishment. A village in Western Pontus refuses your tax demands. They don't rebel. They don't raise arms. They simply do not pay. You send no army. Instead, you send barrels. Each barrel is filled with fermented grain, spoiled wine, and a touch of nightshade oil, just enough to numb the tongue and still the gut. You offer it as a gift from the king. By nightfall, half the village is vomiting blood. By dawn, they are dead. You do not spare the children. Your scribes write it down. You order the record sealed. You want no legends, only certainty. Another obscure detail. In some executions, you use honey not for sweetness but for prolonging agony. Victims are coated in it, then staked to the banks of the Halys River. Insects swarm, maggots burrow. Over days, the bodies rot alive, eyes devoured, tongues blackened, still moaning until silence comes. Some say this was borrowed from Persian execution traditions. Others say you improved it. Historians still fiercely debate whether you attended these sessions personally. But one Roman source, granted a hostile one, describes you laughing, while a man's face was eaten down to the skull. True or not, the fear stuck. Your enemies stop trying to kill you. They begin to pray you never reach them. Meanwhile, inside your own palace, the poison tests continue. You develop variations of your Mithridatium antidote. One customized to your own blood chemistry, another for your heirs, another you feed to your generals. But not all generals remain loyal. One, Diophantus attempts to defect to Rome. You act fast. He's summoned to a feast. The meat is tender, the wine heavy. You speak warmly, you toast. He dies 2 hours later, bleeding from the eyes. The message is received. You rule not just through armies, but through terror. One Roman senator famously wrote Mithridates' rules with an invisible blade. You feel the cut only after you're already dead. Still, you understand that fear alone won't preserve your throne. So you begin exporting your poisons. Clay pots are sent to coastal allies labeled as incense. They're filled with deadly powders, a single whiff fatal. Others contain dried venom sacs ready to be slipped into a meal. You train emissaries to disguise toxins in oils, sauces, cosmetics. You are building a web not of spies but of silent executioners. When your political opponents in allied cities begin dying of sudden illness, you deny responsibility. Publicly. Privately, you mark the formula as a success. One scholar today claims you created the ancient world's first biological warfare unit. Another claims you were simply a paranoid, brilliant lunatic. Both are correct. Even your lovers are not exempt. You keep a locked chest in your private chamber filled with love letters and vials. Each vial is labeled sleep, pain, madness, silence. No one touches it. Some say you drank from one each time you felt too attached to remind yourself what matters. The vials are empty now. You used them all. By the height of your power, the Romans no longer see you as a king. They see you as a sickness, a creeping contagion, a man who cannot be killed by sword or poison, a phantom made of blood and venom, but they will try anyway. The wars are coming, and you are ready. The poison no longer burns your throat. It's familiar now, comforting even, like iron on your tongue, like the feel of your own dagger's hilt, a taste that reminds you cannot be undone. But you are not content with mere survival. You want revenge. Rome has meddled in your affairs for too long, propping up rival kings, interfering with your conquests, bribing your satraps. You've watched them grow fat on foreign blood, arrogantly secure in their belief that no Eastern king could ever match their reach. So you plan something they will never forget. You unleash the single most coordinated mass murder of Roman citizens in antiquity. It is called the Asiatic Vespers. 80,000 Romans and Italians slaughtered in a single night. You orchestrate it through letters, messengers, sealed instructions sent to cities across Asia Minor. You don't just target soldiers or officials. You target every Roman man, woman, and child. Bankers, bakers, infants in cribs. You instruct your allies strike at sunset. Offer no warnings. Spare no one. The bloodletting begins on command. Roman bodies are dragged into the streets. Some are hacked to pieces by mobs. Others are strangled with garlands of their own coins. In Pergamon, the victims are pushed into wells. In Tralles, entire families are crucified outside city walls, their screams echoing through the olive groves. And in Ephesus, the horror takes a darker turn. Roman refugees run to the temple of Artemis, begging for sanctuary. You have already planned for this. The doors are barred. Fires are set. The temple becomes a pyre of living bodies. The priests say nothing. They know who signs their stipends. By dawn, the sea runs pink. The beaches are littered with Roman corpses, some with their throats cut, others still clutching their children. The stench carries for miles. One obscure but chilling fact. In some cities, executioners were offered Roman women as gifts, allowed to violate them before slaughter. You never wrote that order. You didn't need to. The hatred ran that deep, and while the West reels in horror, you stand in your court, wrapped in black silk, and declare Pontus is free. Rome's response is inevitable. The legions march. They come with fire and steel, led by Lucius Cornelius Sulla, ruthless, cold, and more brutal than even you had expected. His troops sack cities. They rape, they burn, they execute collaborators. You retreat, regroup, poison wells, burn grain fields. You send couriers with flasks of bile and venom, hoping to infect their camps. And all the while you continue your ritual. Each morning, poison prayer preparation. Each night, letters sent coded, delivered with a handshake laced in death. You win some battles, you lose others. Your forces scatter, then and regroup. Guerrilla tactics, sudden ambushes, surprise naval raids. You adapt like a serpent, coiling, striking, disappearing. But Rome is relentless. They push deeper, forcing you to flee. You abandon Sinope. You abandon cities that once knelt before you. One by one, your fortresses fall. And still your paranoia grows. You no longer trust your sons. Maciaras, the one who vomited blood as a boy, has grown ambitious. You hear whispers that he has been negotiating with Rome. You summon him to your court. He does not come. So you send a messenger with one command, Dilim. He's strangled on the shores of the Bosphorus. Another grim truth. You do not mourn. You write only this in your journal. Loyalty cannot be inherited. Then there is Zephyri's another son, another betrayal. This time, it is your own wife who opens the gates of a fortress to the enemy. You retaliate by murdering Zephyri's before her eyes. She screams until her throat gives out. You have his body displayed for 3 days covered in oil to delay decay, then thrown into the sea. Even your supporters begin to waver. Your face is thin, your eyes bloodshot, your hair brittle. The poisons have preserved you and ruined you. One advisor dares to suggest you rest. He is found dead the next day, his tongue nailed to a pillar. Historians still fiercely debate whether your descent into suspicion was madness or method. Did the poisons warp your mind? Or was it simply the logic of total war? By now your kingdom is crumbling. Your allies have turned. Your sons are dead or dying. The Romans are closing in. And yet you refuse to die. You flee to Armenia, then to Colchis, then north to the Cimmerian Bosporus. Each time you are driven out, each time you regroup. Your legend mutates the poison king they call you. The Undying, the Snake of the East. You are no longer a man, you are a warning. And deep inside you know the end is coming. But not like this, never like this. The torchlight flickers against the stone walls of your final refuge. You are no longer in a palace, but in a fortress, cold, damp, stinking of mildew and desperation. The Black Sea snarls outside like a beast that has circled you for years, and now wants your bones. Your hair is streaked with grey. Your fingers tremble, not with fear, but with exhaustion. The poisons that once made you immortal now carve furrows into your skin. Your joints ache. Your stomach rebels at the smell of wine. You sleep less. You trust no one. You are 57. You have ruled for over 4 decades. You have survived more assassination attempts than can be counted. But the war is lost. Pompey, the Roman hammer, has crushed your last allies. Your armies have scattered. Your treasury is gone. The world you built with blood and venom has crumbled, and now the walls begin to whisper. There is talk of betrayal, talk of your own son Pharnaces raising a rebellion. You taught him well, too well. You walk the halls alone now. Your guards do not meet your eyes. Your servants work in silence. They've seen what happens to those who speak out of turn. The kitchen boy who dropped a goblet dead. The scribe who misspelled a name in your logbook. Beheaded, but fear no longer feeds you. You can feel it, the final breath of your myth approaching. And so you prepare to die as you lived in full control. You summon your physician. You give the order you swore you never would. He brings the vial, a mixture of fast-acting poisons, enough to kill 5 men. Enough perhaps even for you. You drink it and wait. But nothing happens. The irony is obscene. The immunity you spent a lifetime building, so meticulous, so relentless, now turns against you. You have become immune to your own escape. You clutch your chest. Your throat tightens slightly, but you remain conscious. Breathing, bleeding from the gums, but alive. The poison fails you. You try again. A second dose. Your vision blurs. A pounding behind your eyes. Still your heart refuses to stop. Your breath rattles but does not cease. You fall to your knees howling. Not in pain, but in betrayal. You thought you were the master of poison, but poison obeys no master forever. A lesser-known detail in your final moments, you call for your bodyguard Bituitus, a Gaul loyal and brutal. You give him your sword, and you whisper your final command, "End me." There is hesitation. He does not want to. You scream at him, spit blood, crawl toward him on your hands. You beg. He obeys. The blade pierces your side deep and final. There is no ceremony, no last rites, just a wet crunch of flesh splitting and a soft gasp that fades into stillness. Your body, once fortified against every chemical threat, falls to something far simpler, cold iron and desperation. Historians still fiercely debate whether Betuitas acted on your orders, or if your son Pharnaces forced the matter. Some claim your physician lied that the poison was diluted on purpose. Others argue your immunity had truly become absolute. None can agree. But one truth remains: your death was not majestic. It was not clean. It was not fitting of a man who styled himself invincible. It was human. And yet the legend did not die with you. Your name spread throughout Rome not as a warning, but as a fascination. Generals copied your poison experiments. Apothecaries across Europe swore they possessed versions of your Mithridatium. For centuries, rulers from emperors to popes sought the formula you once took daily. Some even claimed it saved them. The irony: no one could recreate it fully. Too many ingredients, too many secrets burned with your bones. Your body was buried in Sinope in a tomb of black marble, though it would later be desecrated, looted, and forgotten. But the whispers survived. The Poison King, the man who could not be killed. One obscure tidbit: centuries later, paranoid nobles across Europe kept tiny portraits of you inside their medicine chests, your face beside dried herbs and bloodstones, as if invoking your myth could keep death at bay. But death always comes, even for you, especially for you. But your death was not the end. It was only the beginning of a darker legacy. The world devoured the story of your life not as tragedy, not as warning, but as blueprint. In Rome, generals returned from battle with bags of herbs, powders, snakeskins. They demanded their slaves test concoctions on themselves. Mithridates did it, they said, as if invoking your name made cruelty scientific. Pliny the Elder called your antidote marvelous. Galen tried to perfect it. Emperors obsessed over it. Nero had his own food tasters. Marcus Aurelius is said to have consumed a version of your brew daily, as if channeling your cold invulnerability into his own weakening body. It didn't work. It never worked. The secret to your survival had never been just the poison. It had been the fear, the sheer terror you instilled in those around you. The ritual, the obsession, the empire of dread you ruled like a priest of death. Your name lived on in texts whispered through monasteries and scriptoriums, not as king, not as warrior, but as something far more dangerous. The first true toxicologist. And your heirs were not your children. They were inquisitors, alchemists, assassins. The Order of the Assassins in Persia. Some scholars trace their use of slow, cumulative poisoning to your methods. In Renaissance Italy, the Borgia family murderers, wrapped in velvet, kept your notes in translation. Their cantarella, a legendary poison, mimicked your own layered toxins. In France, Catherine de' Medici studied your formulas. Her court physicians experimented on the sick and poor, testing remedies, not to cure, but to immunize. The term Mithridatism immunity through exposure entered medical vocabulary centuries after you bled into your own flaw. But the most grotesque legacy: your methods were weaponized. In the 17th century, King Louis XIV's court saw an epidemic of poisonings, noble women killing husbands, rivals, even children. Arrested poisoners claimed to follow l'Estile de Mithridate. You became a patron saint of the silent death. And the English. They made you theatre. In 1673, playwright Jean Racine turned your death into a tragic opera. Audiences wept at your suffering. They cheered your resistance, and they missed the truth entirely. You were not a martyr. You were a tyrant of chemistry, a monster of control, and the ultimate irony, your obsession with avoiding death, became the foundation for centuries of medical cruelty. Vivisections, live autopsies, poison trials on the poor, all justified under the shadow of your name. And still historians debate, did you actually build immunity, or were your daily doses symbolic, a psychological spell you cast on yourself? A placebo cloaked in terror? Did you believe your own legend, or were you simply so afraid to die? You constructed a palace of toxins just to delay the inevitable. No one agrees, but one thing is certain. You did not trust anyone, not your priests, not your lovers, not your gods, only the poison. Even now, modern researchers unearth scraps of your formulas in dusty museum drawers, stunned by the complexity. Opium, myrrh, viper flesh, cinnamon, arsenic, rhubarb, poppy tears, an alchemy of terror. You built it for yourself, and the world turned it outward. Final obscure detail in 2004. Scientists attempting to replicate Mithridatium, using ancient texts, found the dosage could induce seizures and hallucinations in lab animals, but failed to kill. Even in fragments, your work resists clarity. It resists certainty, just like you did. And so, the stench of your legacy remains a perfume of venom, burnt herbs, and empire. They still whisper your name in medical journals tucked between Latin terms and footnotes on pharmacology. Mithridates VI, King of Pontus, Poison Eater, the man who could not die. But history remembers what medicine forgets. You did die, bloodied, groaning, betrayed by your own brilliance. Your agony was not a myth. It was a man crawling across cold stone, desperate for silence. Your legacy is not immunity. It is fear. A fear so potent it survived millennia. A fear that poisoned generations, first their minds, then their morals, then their flesh. And in this way you live on, not as hero, but as virus. An idea that infects those who believe they can cheat death if only they suffer enough. But death is not impressed by suffering. It comes regardless, and when it does, it takes everything. Even the man who drank poison every day. So tonight, when you reach for your medicine, your tea, your comfort, remember the king who could